And when you look at it from Google, okay, you can see it laid out on the ground. It's a hexagon and a hexagon and a hexagon. And we know that the hexagon is really a two-dimensional version of a three-dimensional cube. But what's interesting is right in the middle of that is a thing that's called harp. If most of you know what that is. I don't think it's what people assume it is. I'll explain it here in a second. So you got harp, which is an array of antennas, yeah? And so those antennas, people are blaming all kinds of weather phenomena and stuff. I don't believe that. I think this is being done on a much higher level than harp. But so you have the Kabbalistic cube and a cube and a cube, and 3 cubes is 3, 3. That's 3 times 3, or 3 squared. So you got 3 squares, right? Equals 9, and 9 is the occultic number for Saturn. Okay, but what's interesting is that the place where this is sitting, yeah, this is the name of it. You ready? If you're sitting down, stand up. If you're standing up, sit down. It's called Exmouth. 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 But let's break the word down. Exmouth. It doesn't matter. You can leave the E or take the E off. So you have X, just the letter X, yeah? Dash, and then we have mouth. Exmouth. X represents the planet Saturn, and mouth is something that you speak with. And then you have the array of antennas called harp. Now this is another play with letters. What they did is they did like the same thing with Google, which is really GOG-L, which is Global Occult Government .el. Well, harp is H-A-R-P, but in reality it's H-A-R-P, like the harp that you strum. Because what does a harp do? A harp creates noise. How? Through tone, which is vibration. So we have X mouth. It's a speaking point for Saturn. X mouth. And right after this video, I'll put it on there so you can see it for yourself, and I outlined it in different colors. So you've got X mouth. All right, so it's a speaking point. It's communication. It's a communication a doorway. It's a communication to the planet Saturn. That's what it's saying. You know, which brings me to something else. You know, I always try and look into the Bible first. I was raised a Lutheran, and I believe in Jesus Christ. But I do believe, and I know since I was a little kid, what got me started in all of this is when Jesus was in the Garden of Gethsemane, before they came to take him to have him crucified, the disciples were falling asleep, and Jesus was getting pissed, and he told them, he said, listen, you guys, you got to wake up, because they're coming to get me, and pretty soon I'm going to be gone. And so he said, listen, and as he explained through the night, he said, there's many other things I'd like to tell you, but you couldn't understand them, okay, or to bear them. And I remember as a little kid asking, pastors and teachers, what was it that Jesus, was trying to say? And nobody could answer it, or they wouldn't answer it. And, it was at that point, as a small kid, that I started to formulate in my head that Jesus was saying more in the Bible than what people were picking up on. In other words, the innuendos, read between the lines type of stuff. Now, I had a real rough childhood, and so I'm just going to give you a little bit of history on how I got on this whole timeline thing. And my mom was real violent when I was a kid, and she had a way of drinking too much. And I remember one time when she beat the shit out of me when I was a little kid. I remember I was 5 years old, and I remember she told me that the reason that she had problems when she was a kid was because of me. Now, at 5 years old, I already knew that the timeline was wrong, and I told her, I said, well, wait a minute, you were here before I was. But see, maybe this is what planted all this in my head. I didn't know anything about the Saturn alien thing, but I did know about time. Okay? So, let's go jump back into the Bible for a minute. So we already know that there's a harp establishment in a place called Exmouth, which is a connection between Saturn and harp, okay? Let's go back and look at the story of Noah, okay? The story of Noah. The story goes, you've all heard it, I'm sure. So God told Noah, look, build an ark, because I'm going to flood the world. There was really no rain before that because the ozone was thicker, it was misty, people didn't know of rain. I'm not so sure that this was even really a flood like what they think. Because what I'm about to tell you, it just doesn't make sense. It was some kind of a calamity. That I'm sure that there was, because this is not the first time the world's been around. Because God told Adam and Eve to be fruitful and replenish the earth. And if you jump into the book of John, it says, you know, they use the word tohu babohu, which is the world was made void, and the world was made again. Okay? So there we know, at least on 2 different occasions, that the book of Ecclesiastics, a time to build up, a time to tear down. Well, that's Saturnalian. You know, in the occult, Saturn always destroys what he creates and recreates it. So that aside, so let's say that this all went down, that God told Noah, look, you're the good guy on here, everybody else is wicked. I'm going to wipe them all out. But I'm going to give them a chance to repent. So while you're building this boat, you go and tell them, look, there's something big coming, right? So the story goes on, everybody laughs at him, they think he's a nut. And plus, he was a drinker. We definitely know that because the story goes on to say that his son saw him naked and they were cursed and blah, blah, whatever. Okay, so the guy enjoyed a couple of beers, who doesn't? So what happens is, so it rains and it kills all the people in the world, okay? For 40 days and 40 nights it rains, it floods, you know, it's supposed to wipe out these things called the Nephilim and all the evil people. But it clearly states at the end of the story that there was, some of the Nephilim survived, okay? And the one particularly that survived was called Og. Well, his name is spelled O-G. Incidentally, this is why you have that name on the street for the original gangsters, because the Nephilim are the OG, the original gangsters. But those creeps at the top like to incorporate this in and make it fashionable. That's what OG is. That goes back to the Nephilim, the troublemakers, the original gangsters. Okay? So now you know where that comes from. But so let's say that the story's true, and so all of a sudden now the whole world's wiped out, and now the ark winds up on Mount Ararat. If it really is even a mountain, it just means a high place. Yeah. One other thing, it's interesting because you've all seen the model of Noah's Ark. It looks like a regular boat. But if you go and you read the story of the version of Gilgamesh, the ark was a cube. If I got to take my choice, I'd probably say it was pretty much a cube, considering everything else in the freaking Bible is. Okay? So whatever this thing is that they're in lands, okay, and then they get out, and the world starts all over again. Well, this story cannot be true, not in the way that it's told. Because it isn't like one of his sons got out and said, hey, I'm going to change my name to Giuseppe and become, and become Italian and start making pizzas. Where did all the pizzas go? Twink, be quiet. That was Twink chiming in. Where did all the people go? And where did we should all literally be speaking Hebrew, which is ancient Phoenician. Where did all the other races come from? I understand that languages break down and they change. Where did all the other people come from? Where did the black man come from? Where did the Chinese man come from? Where did the Indian come from? Where did the Asians come from? The story could not have happened the way it's saying. The story is just a story of some calamity, but it could not have been in the fashion that it says, because we would all be speaking Phoenician. Okay? So then you've got the Tower of Babel. Okay? The Tower of Babel. What is the Tower of Babel? Well, the word Bab means doorway, El means Saturn. So it was a doorway to Saturn. Well, maybe Harp is the Tower of Babel. It's the doorway, it's an opening. You know, when they talk about the Tower of Babel, it wasn't an actual building. It was communication. Word. Listen to the very beginning of the Bible. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God. But the Word is not God. The Word, the sound, the tone. It's the tone. It's the vibration. It's the vibration. So we had a bunch of people conglomerated together that understood how the system worked that we don't know how today, but science is doing this behind the scenes, which is probably what HARP is. And they were all trying to get together, and the real creator came down and said, hey, F this. No, this ain't going to happen. You know, you ain't going to trump me. I'm the creator. And so that's where the different languages came from. But we should have, at least up until that point, all been speaking Phoenician. Or that's what the Hebrews speak. So the Tower of Babel, that I believe. The flood I don't believe, because it doesn't make sense. First of all, you would have had to say that all of civilization had to be crushed into one small area for him to get the word out to everybody. Okay? The world was different back in those days. You know, the continents were not shaped the same. So the story is, it's coded. It's telling you that something major happened, but I don't believe it was a flood like water, even though this world has been destroyed and created numerous times. Okay? We are not the first ones to be here. Civilizations go up and civilizations go down. That's what the pyramids are. The pyramids are directly connected with Saturn, because the Saturn on the top of North Pole is a perfect hexagon. And that hexagon creates a cube. And that cube is what creates the Kabbalistic tree of life. But it's a time cube. When that thing spins and gets in certain positions against other planets, okay, that sets up, they have a playbook for this stuff. I've never seen it. I'm just saying they have a playbook, and this is why wars are started, and this is why depressions come, and it's just the way the system works. You know? The Kabbalistic Jews, you know, worship two deities, basically. The first one is Saturn. The second one is the moon, because Saturn and the moon always work in conjunction with each other. You know? They always work in conjunction with each other, without exception. Okay? I talked to a guy one time, I'm not going to say his name because it's not privy for me to say, but you know, he told me, he says, here's how it works. At least he gave me a little bit. He says, it goes from the center of Saturn through the center of the moon and down through the center of the earth. Okay, well, that seems like simple geometry to me. So we're talking about angles. Okay, what are angles? Angles are degrees. Okay, I'm just saying. I don't know how it works. We never went any farther with it, and I don't really think that I need to know how it works. But getting back to this thing with HAARP, what, you know, when you get done with this, when you get done listening to or watching me here, I'll put it on here and you can see it for yourself. So I need to go find out where these other HAARPs, you know, places are at, and look at the names of them, because it's just not a coincidence. You know, as I like to say, at some point it stops being a coincidence and becomes evidence. So it's highly unlikely that they would build it at a place called Exmouth, make this giant array of antennas which create tones and vibrations, and then name it after a doorway to Saturn. It ain't happening, believe me. The other thing I wanted to bring up before I end this is, I know that a lot of people think that the chemtrails are there to poison you and kill you. A lot of it is aluminum that they're spraying. And of course, everything has a byproduct that creates either good or bad. Of course, if you start spraying fucking, excuse my language, aluminum into the atmosphere, you're going to get some kind of, you know, blowback from it that ain't good for the environment. But I don't think that is why they're doing it. If you've ever messed around with radios, you'll understand. If you've ever been driving in your car, and you're driving and you turn on a radio station, and all of a sudden it gets weaker and weaker and farther and farther. It's because the signal's dropping off. Because FM, which is frequency modulation, when it comes off the tower, it goes in a straight line, yeah? And so as it goes out, it starts dropping off, because a radio wave has mass. Okay, it starts dropping off, and eventually you get farther out than the radio wave is, okay? AM, which is amplitude modulation, goes up and hits the ionosphere and bounces down, okay? And there's a whole art to doing that, where these guys can talk on the other side of the world with 2 watts of power, which isn't much for traveling that distance. But it's my personal belief that the reason that they're spraying this crap all over the planet is because when you put the aluminum in the air, which is what most antennas are made out of, okay? They're not made out of gold, and they're not made out of brass. They're made out of aluminum. If you spray enough of the shit in the air, then the whole planet becomes a big-ass antenna. And whatever's being sent back and forth from there or whatever, we don't have to wait for certain conditions. See, because when you work with ham radio, there's things that interfere with that, sun flares and all kinds of other things that will increase the radio wave's distance or greatly decrease it. So if we make the whole planet an antenna through the air, We don't have to worry about that stuff because no matter where we transmit, it's going to go into the bigger antenna, which is now into the atmosphere of the Earth, and that information will get through. That's what I think is what they're spraying the aluminum for.